The solution to our problem here was to remove our keeper bolts and put a couple tack welds on either side of those pins. So I put a long bolt in there, threaded that in, put the ground clamp on. You want that ground clamp as close as possible so we don't damage the needle bearings inside the gear or the needle bearings that we installed on either side of the gear here. Get your ground as close as you can. This worked out good because the bolt is right to the pin. We're welding the pin to the cage. Everything should be good that way. I left it assembled because I didn't want to compromise our needle bearings inside here on the input gear. This is going to be removed and we're going to be putting the other input gear in anyway. So if we got any weld or anything on here, we're not worried about that. This is some kind of cast material. I don't know if it's cast iron or cast steel. I don't believe so, but it's some kind of cast. It's might even be some kind of cast alloy. Anyway, what you want to do is you want to get yourself a torch. You want to heat up the area that you're going to be welding. Make sure it's as clean as it can be. Heat it up, get it to about 300 degrees, put your weld in there, and once you got your weld in, then you want to peen it with a hammer. Reduce the stress so that when it cools down it doesn't crack. What we had on this one here, we had welded this, didn't peen it because it was all, the weld was on the inside here. Pretty hard to peen that. So anyways, but we welded it, we didn't peen it, and it ended up cracking. Took some learning lessons on how to weld this. So I practiced on here first before we did the finished piece. This is after we had tack welded these pins, and then I just wiped this surface clean and smooth. So it's just consistent and smooth and everything like that, and we won't have any high spots that can hang up on that fork or in when this is installed into the ring gear. As you can see, needle bearing has to be installed first before the pinions, because the pinions go over top of that. We've got this all ready to go, and what we're going to do is we're going to change the input shaft and we're going to put it into here. And what I did was I just used some set screws in here, and I greased these Planetary gears for the needles inside the gear, and then I got a set screw on either side, basically locks that grease in there. I personally feel that it might be difficult for the transmission fluid, because that's what's in this thing, to get in there and lubricate that. Now, other people would argue, well, that's what you got going on here, right? And this is just fine. Well, I can agree with that. That's fine. But we have the option to do that if we wanted to. If you didn't want to do that, you can just simply take these out, and you've got those holes that go in there, and it would aid and help into lubricating our Planetary gears. But I'm just going to try this out. If you had the same thing happen where the case is low on oil or something like this, you might get a little more life out of it or save it from total destruction. Who knows? And also too, after greasing these gears, they turn, but it's kind of, they aren't freewheeling. Like they aren't as loose as these ones here. So whether that's good or bad, I don't know. It's just a little stiffer, a little more consistent and stiff. It's not as loose. So anyways, we'll put this back together. Here it is here with that input shaft installed, and it's nice and smooth. It's not real loose or anything like that. It's actually fairly tight, but I don't have any worries there because that grease inside there handled that heat really well when I was doing the welding and everything like that. So if it handles the heat, I do believe it's going to resist the transmission fluid from breaking it down as well. I think it's going to work pretty good. So we're going to start off here with this portion of the case sitting as the way it is, and we want to clean everything out of there, make sure everything's all clean. Spin these bearings around, and you'll be able to feel if it's catching or if there's a sticky spot or something like that. This bearing here is good. I don't feel any issues with that one. Now this one here, you got to remove this lock ring that goes in this groove here, and then you flip the case the other way, and then you're going to use a drift, and you're going to pound the bearing out this way because it rests against this lip here. Once you've got the bearing out, then you can flip it back, flip the case back the way it is. I got this wood here kind of supporting it, and then I'm going to drive the seal out the bottom. So I'm just going to use a screwdriver or something like that, and I'm going to get into the corner of the seal, and I'm going to hammer that out of there. If you need to know what your seal number is, it's marked on the inside here. And then the bearing, same thing. You can stick it in some fingers there, and you're just going to roll it, and you will feel if there's a catchy spot or if it's nice and smooth. And in this case, I mean, I would reuse this bearing if I didn't have a spare one. I mean, it's generally in good shape, but when you spin it, you can feel there's a spot. You can definitely feel it. So I'm going to change this while we got it all tore apart, and this should be for the front output, and you're looking at a 6207 for this bearing here. So I'm going to change this bearing, and I'm going to install a new seal, put that back together. I'll use aluminum drift and drive that out that way as it is set up here. And the reason we're doing that is because we got to clean this surface up really well for reassembly, and we don't want to get anything into our bearing. So we're just going to remove the bearing, going to clean that up, and then we'll reinstall it. You can pull out your shift mechanism here, and that'll just slide out of the bore to manipulate it so that you can pull it out. And then basically on this end, right there, you have an O-ring, and then you have this Teflon spacer. So if it was leaking before, that was the problem, was the O-ring. I'm just cleaning it up. If you've got a new O-ring, throw it in there. Away you go. Seal here that I'm putting in, I just put some RTV sealant on there. I'm just letting it sit for about say 15 minutes, let it tack up a little bit, and then drive that home, and that's going to help in sealing that as well. So all new seals and O-rings if you have them. So now that we got our new bearing, new seal in there, and we removed that bearing, put it back in, clean the other surface there, we've replaced, or if you have one, replace the O-ring to seal the shifter mechanism there. Now we can drop in our Planetary down in the bottom here. There we go, we've dropped in our new Planetary, and now we can start reassembling the shaft, the chain and sprockets.